Hi, friends. Good morning. This is our final morning of our retreat with you. Um, I hope that you've been able to catch all 4 days. If not, you feel free to go back and watch them at your leisure. My name is Amber Severance, and I'm really honored to just be able to share something from God's Word with you again this morning, the last morning that we get to do this. And one what I really want to share today is just emphasizing that we not grow weary. Um, I don't know how many of you are watching or attending today who maybe have been on the journey of homeschooling for a very long time. I have my oldest is going to be 26 this year. And so that means that I've been at this for about 23 years. And I will readily admit to you that having teenagers and adult children can really throw you for a loop and can cause you to question sometimes everything that you thought you knew and thought you understood about what you're doing. So I want to speak to those of you who may be weary and discouraged, a place where all of us are at one point or another. And so first I want to go back to the passage that we talked about yesterday morning in Hebrews chapter 12. And I read to you verses 1 and 2. But this morning I'd like to read verse 3. And here's how it goes. For consider him, Jesus, who endured such hostility from sinners against himself. Consider him so that you won't grow weary and lose heart. You know what I love about that is the implication that we tend to grow weary and we tend to lose heart. And so here is a precious reminder to us. Here, consider Jesus, consider the hostility that he endured so that you won't grow weary and you won't lose heart. So somehow, moms, maybe dads listening, thinking about our Savior and all that he endured, in some way protects us and helps us not to grow weary and lose heart. I'll tell you what, I tend to grow weary and lose heart when I put my eyes on my children. When my children make choices that I don't agree with, when they seem to be antagonistic toward my husband and me and maybe our advice for them, when they make choices that we would not make and would rather they not make, if I keep my eyes on them, I will lose heart and grow weary. And so Christ very specifically asks us not to put our eyes on people, but to put them on him. Another spot where I love to go when I'm feeling weary and losing heart is Galatians chapter 6, verses 9 and 10. Very familiar to you probably, but here they are. So we must not get tired of doing good, for we will reap at the proper time if we don't give up. Therefore, as we have opportunity, we must work for the good of all especially for those who belong to the household of faith. There's this very real sense that you and I are called to do good. We're called to do good and to not get tired of doing it. And one of the motivators for not getting tired is to remember that we're going to reap if we don't faint. And some of us mistakenly think that reaping means that our children will turn out exactly like we plan and dream, that every one of our children will be successful or walking with God or loving each other or whatever. We sometimes have a difficulty accepting that blessing that God holds out for us might not show up till we are in heaven. That we are to be about doing good for fellow believers, for the household of faith. Do you notice that there? That your family, your blood family, your family that you're living with in the walls of your own home are not the only people that matter. Okay? I hope that you belong to a community of believers where you can look out and see the needs of others and work to meet them and work to do good to them. Not just your own children, not just your own family. And for those of us whose children are slowly but surely leaving our homes, our lives are not over. We have good works to do for many people, and we need to get busy doing them. And look, you matter. Living for Jesus matters. Not just if your children choose to do the right thing and follow after Jesus. That's not the only reason you matter. You matter. Your walk with Christ matters. He loved you and died for you and is sanctifying you and calling you to be more like Jesus. Don't grow weary doing good. You will reap, he promises. And we are not to love our children and teach them about God and his word just so that they'll be perfect human beings and then we'll count for something. No, I need to train and disciple my children because that's what God's asked me to do, period. And I want to please him. So I'm going to do what I'm supposed to do. And they need to do what they're supposed to do before Jesus. And I want to reap at the proper time. God, help me not to get tired of doing good. And then back to that verse in Hebrews, right? Keep our eyes on Jesus so that we won't grow weary and lose heart. I pray that you will keep your eyes on him and that you will not grow weary. Surround yourself with people who will encourage you to keep your eyes on Jesus. And let's pray. And I'm going to close us in prayer. It's been such a privilege to spend a little time with you each morning. Let's close. God, we get weary and we get tired and we lose heart. So will you please help us to keep our eyes on you so that we won't grow weary and lose heart? Will you help us to be in your word, memorizing it, thinking about it, preaching it to ourselves so that we will not grow weary and lose heart? And God, I pray for anyone who's watching, will you help us to do good and to not get tired of doing good? And God, would you help us to look around and see the people around us who are trying to do good and who may need a word of encouragement from us to stay in it and to keep on to keep on doing good. Help us to be known as people who are encouragers. Help us to lift up the weary hands of the women and men around us. God, thank you for the privilege of knowing you and for the privilege of having your word and seeing the example of Jesus in its pages. Help us not to grow weary and to lose heart. In your name I pray. Amen. Enjoy your final day of this retreat. Bye-bye.
Hello and welcome back. Today is the final day of our Run the Race retreat. We are talking all about finishing the race today. And so we want to thank you so much for joining us this week. Make sure to stick around after this session. We're going to be doing a live Q&A session where we'll be addressing some of the questions and situations that were brought up in the chat all week long. And of course, ask your questions today, interact with us. We are watching that live. If you're watching this later though, we have done a whole week of sessions, Bible study, praise music, and more throughout this week. So make sure you go back and watch the rest of the playlist if you're watching this later, or if that's something you're interested in. And for those of you joining us live, we're so glad that you've been here with us this week, but we're not done yet. So stick around and let's dive into how you finish that race. We'll start with some introductions. You've already met Christy and Lisa earlier this week, but why don't you share a little bit, ladies, about your journey, where you are in that journey, and why you're going to be able to tell us about finishing the race as you both have older students. Christy, you're on top, so I'll let you go first.
Yeah, I'm definitely in the thick of this part of it, the finish, getting to the finish and feeling a little bit overwhelmed by that, the fact that there's 3 years remaining. And then also a little bit, wow, only 3 years. I can do this, So there's a mix. It's definitely a mix. And, but yeah, that's where I am. I have 3 years remaining and 15 years behind. So don't do the math if you're sitting at home with littles. I did that. I don't recommend it. If you're just take it a year at a time and don't do the math early on about how many years you'll be homeschooling if you go all the way. But it is a great journey, and I'm glad that I'm on it, and I'm glad to be here.
Well, thank you so much. Lisa, you're up next.
So my homeschooling of students journey is finished. My oldest graduated in 2018, and then my baby graduated in 2021. And we did it with Sonlight, so it definitely is possible. Now I love just encouraging others, and I feel like I've moved from the runner to just the pacer. And I'm just running easy and shouting out encouragement. So I love that.
I love that analogy. I am Sunny. I'm Sonlight's community manager, and I'm about halfway through my homeschool journey. I started back in 2012 with my daughter, who is now a freshman in high school. So we're right in the middle of homeschooling a high schooler. And then my baby is 5 years younger, so he's still in elementary school. So I still have quite a few years left. I love what Christy said about don't do the math when you're in the middle of it, because it's going to feel intimidating and like a lot. But I hope, when I'm on the other side of it, I'll look back and say, wow, that was the fastest 20-ish years of my life. And it was definitely worth it. So far, though, I think it is. So we're going to talk about kind of the end of the race, the end of your homeschool journey. But before we dive into that, let's talk about something that intimidates a lot of people, even if they are longtime homeschoolers, and that is homeschooling through high school. You both have done that and successfully graduated students, but I know that's intimidating for a lot of people, and a lot of people wonder if they can homeschool through high school. So what advice or encouragement would you offer there? And what are some of the things that maybe are different about homeschooling a high schooler, or something to be aware of that maybe you didn't have to worry about when your kids were younger?
I want to start with encouragement for those who are looking at it thinking, is this even a good idea? Should we even try this? And say, I think that it's a great idea. And we homeschooled through high school. My son's strengths are very strong in math. He just finished up organic chemistry and his test grades were like 97, 99. This is what he was calling home with. So I was pretty impressed by that. It didn't hurt us at all that we homeschooled all the way through. And the subjects that he that were tough, there were some professors who had some extraordinarily high expectations. He was in a study group with a couple of Sonlighters that he met at college. They had a little study group in the library and they offered insight, and he said they made it make sense. That's my experience with Sonlighting all the way through. There were subjects that my son was very strong in, and the subject that he needed the help with the study group was one that he was strong in as well, but there were just some things that were not connecting, and thankfully he met a couple of Sonlighters. So Sonlight all the way to the end is a good idea, if you're wondering.
So what's different about high school is just that you need to maybe keep a bit more records. I live in a very loose homeschool state, so I didn't have a lot of records. So that was one thing that was different. Another thing that was different was that I let my kids kind of be in charge. College is so much about self-motivating and getting things done without someone standing over you. And that can be a big shock if that's never been your experience, if you've had a helicopter mom, because homeschooling moms tend to want to control things. That's part of why we homeschool. So that was something that was different as I started in 9th grade, letting the reins out slowly and just by senior year. And the other thing that was different was, instead of me saying, this is what we're going to study, checking in with my child. What is it that you want to study? Because that's really what a high school experience is about, is exploring those things, because you don't want to try to figure out what you want to be when you grow up, when you get to college, because that's really too late. So those things were different, somewhat intimidating, but really to encourage. You're just doing what you've always done. You're just doing it a little differently. But by this point, your child really doesn't know anything that you didn't teach them. So just keep on teaching them and it will be okay.
Yeah, I think I've heard before, and I agree with this, that you become more of a coach and an encouragement to them as they're going where they're going to go. And so you're that kind of pacer, like Lisa said, where you're making sure they're hitting their marks. You've got to still be there. There's a role there for accountability in high school, but also just an encouraging, okay, we're off track a little bit. How are you going to accomplish all of this by the end of the week if we haven't done anything on Monday, or whatever, or if we, are off track in some area. Or if they're making decisions about which classes to take and that type of thing. I think it's definitely a coaching role. Here are some ideas. Here's what I did with your siblings. Here are some other example transcripts of people who homeschooled, and kind of finding those things, finding resources for them to see and giving them information, and then talking through it and letting them be more a part of the decision.
I agree. Yeah, it's a lot of asking questions, I feel like. If your child says, I want to be this when I grow up. Okay, well, what do you need to do to get there? And what are your odds of succeeding in that field, depending on what type of field it is? Are you going to need college? Are you not? Is it very much a talent-based area, like something in the arts is going, if you don't have the skills, it may not matter how many classes you take if you're not good at that, versus something that you can learn. Is this something that you can learn that you're interested in? How many people do we know that do not use the degree that they went into school for in their career because they discovered, oh, I actually like this better. So I think homeschooling actually allows the students more opportunity to kind of hone in on what they do enjoy versus just saying, oh, I'm good at this, so I guess this is my next plan, which is kind of what my high school was like. If you were the smart kid, these were your options. If you were the creative kid, these were your options. And there just wasn't as much personal choice or even responsibility in figuring out what you wanted to do with your life. So that's something that I've really enjoyed as my daughter has hit high school, is a lot of the conversations of, okay, well, what do you enjoy? What do you want to do? Is that something you should start working towards now? Or is that something that, oh, yeah, you've got to take these classes first before you can do it? I actually find the teaching piece of homeschooling to be a lot easier now too, because she does everything basically on her own with Sonlight's high school programs. If you're not familiar with those, definitely check them out. But she does her student guide. She paces her own reading. You know, I just tell her, I want to meet with you at this time and we're going to discuss all the things. And here's what we need to go over. And you need to be done with XYZ. And then she does it. And, you know, she is my firstborn. She's pretty self-motivated. So I know not every kid is that way. I love, Christy, what you said, you know, how are you going to get this done by the end of the week if you're not doing anything today? You may have kids. I have a feeling my younger child is going to be one that I'm going to have to kind of keep on schedule a little more just because he's got a different personality. But yeah, but I think homeschooling in high school, it's been really fun to have more mature conversations and see who that child is becoming and go more into the relationships and learning what she thinks about things, less so than me just saying, here's what we're going to learn, here's what I think. It's really that, well, what do you think about this? Something that I found really helpful too, my local umbrella school put on a high school seminar that walked us through, you know, career planning and how to create a transcript and what do you do for your child that's graduating, whether they're going to college or not. And so that really, like, I had talked to other people and I was like, I know you can homeschool in high school, but kind of getting that step by step, here's the things you need to be aware of, was super helpful for me. I'm very much, I love to research and like to know what I need to know. I don't like to walk into things blind. And so that local seminar that they put on was super helpful. So definitely look online, look at the schools your student might want to attend, you know, dual enrollment, any of those types of things. You're probably going to want to research, but it's not as intimidating now that I'm in high school with my child as I thought it was going to be.
Because you're really just doing what you've always done.
Yeah, exactly. So what about, Christy, you mentioned you've got some that are off at college right now and some still in the house. Obviously, Lisa, you had that at one point too. So how do things change there? Like, did you find it was harder maybe to keep younger siblings on track when they had older siblings coming back from different school breaks? Or, you know, now that you have older children that maybe don't have the same rules or restrictions as younger children, what do you do when you kind of have one foot out the door and one still in?
I did find myself this is our third year. Our oldest is a junior in college, and then we have a freshman in college as well. And the freshman in college is at home full time, so he's here attending classes locally, and then the oldest is hours away. I did find myself each break having to change what we were doing. So it might affect your planning a little bit, and just to be aware of that beforehand. If spring break is on the horizon this year, you might look at that. If you have a college student coming home, you might look at that and you might think, oh, well, we're going to school this week because their co-op has a different spring break. That may not work out the way you want it to. So if they have papers due and that type of thing during a week when siblings are home, then, and they're trying to do all the brothering, as I call it at my house, we have all boys. Brothering takes time. So I think that's good to know. It may be different at your house, but in my house, it's the breaks that are the big, I think those were just really unexpected. His first year of school, I didn't realize how much they would derail us. We were so glad, for him to be home, but it's also hard to get everyone else to realize their breaks do not line up. And just because he's on spring break or Christmas break or Thanksgiving break or whatever it may be, So
We encountered that a bit, but we had encountered that, in other parenting decisions. Yes, your sister gets to stay up 30 minutes later than you do. She's older than you, or whatever the case may be. But I did find that my youngest was very motivated to get up to a stopping point when she knew her sister was coming home. And so that might mean for her that she doubled up on some things so that even though I had planned for school to happen, she was able to get it done before her sister came home. But I also felt, and I know Christy feels this way, when the older one comes home, sometimes the most important thing is spending time together, and the school can get set aside for a little bit. Like, it's not the end of the world if you don't get to polynomials this week. They'll still be there when you get back. So I do think it's a balancing act, but just like in life, my house is not fair. I mean, that is just always been a rule. This is not a fair house. I have a saying about that, which I'll spare you, but my kids will quote it to you. Like, it's not fair. That's just how it goes. It's not fair.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, that it is a little different, right? But I loved what you said about the polynomials will still be there next week, because I'm thinking about if you're out in your professional life, you still have to plan your job around when you take time off, and that still happens in real life. I think that's a good skill to get used to. And I love what you said about your daughter was more motivated by the fact that her sister was coming home to get things done earlier. I think this is something that, with having a teenager, I'm like, you get to be done whenever you finish the work. So if you want to finish it faster and take a longer break, whether that be Christmas or summer or whatever, go ahead and do more work when you have the time. And so that's something that the one of my daughter's friends said, oh, well, why aren't you coming to the local high school with us? It would be so much fun. And they were having these conversations with her, and she was like, well, I get to sleep in, I get my school done in about 4 or 5 hours. Like, if I want to have all of Friday off, I just do extra school during the week. All of these different things that even she was starting to see, like, okay, if I can manage my own time, then I get to do what I want to do later. So I think that better sets you up for adult life when you're going to be balancing maybe college and a job and all the different things that you're going to have going on. Let's talk about that empty nest situation, though. I know this can be hard for a lot of parents when their kids move out, but I think especially if you've been homeschooling, that's a big job that you've done all these years. So what do you do after your kids are gone? This mission that you've had for all of these years is now done. This part of the journey is over. What happens next? Or what encouragement or advice would you offer for somebody maybe who's trying to figure out what their next steps are?
Well, I remember people used to ask me, well, what are you going to do when you're done homeschooling? And my immediate answer was like, sleep for 6 months, just sleep. But really, I found as my kids got older, I started investing in friendships differently. Not always hanging out with their friends' moms, but actually my own friends. I became a runner when I could leave them at home, and so that was fun. You can volunteer if you feel like you don't want to take a paying job. But there are a lot of things that you can do that you can start doing as your children get older. I liken it to figuring out, what do I want to be when I grow up? Because, for a lot of us, we've gone from education to a job because that's what you do. And then we got married, and then we started having babies. And somewhere along the way, it's very possible to lose yourself. And as you have babies and are a homeschool mom, it's likely that your relationship with your husband could suffer. So I think if you're a young mama listening to this, I would just say invest in your husband, invest in your marriage. I always told my kids their dad was my favorite because they were leaving and he wasn't. I was kind of stuck with him. So that has been really fun for us to, we've traveled a lot more. We both have the opportunity to be flexible with our work. He can work from home, I can work from home, and we've traveled and we've just, go out to dinner more because who wants to cook for two people every night? But it really can be exciting. And I've just entered the new phase of grandma. So that's fun. I feel like I finished the big race. Now I'm on like this exciting side race that I can look at the scenery and, because I'm not in the thick of it, but I get to do the fun things. So there's a lot of life left after homeschooling. You just have to find it and figure out what part of it you want to work on.
Yeah. And I'm just at the beginning of that transition to that. So I feel like I'm starting to really be prayerful about that. What do you want me to do in this season? Because all these years, my background is in education, and all these years I've thought, oh, I don't have a desire to be back in the classroom necessarily. I have been dipping my toe back in that and getting involved in my community in that way. And so I've been teaching some classes, and it's I'm still working at home some as well, but I love a couple of days a week. I'm in a classroom, a couple of different, situations, and I got hugged probably about 40 times last week by first graders, and it was amazing. I had people bringing me little notes, and they handed them to me, and it said I love you on them. It was amazing. I loved it. And so I think it's being prayerful, finding what that is, what it's going to look like Lisa said, reconnecting after you've been rowing pretty hard when you've been homeschooling. It's a team effort, but for the husband and for the wife. And so whichever one of that, whether you're the husband that's homeschooling or the wife that's homeschooling, reconnecting with the spouse is amazing. I'm also reading Empty Nest Full Life, Discovering God's Best for Your Next. That's on my list. I don't know if it's a good book or not. I'm just starting it, but it's by Jill Savage. So if you want to check out, I started looking for books like that. I'm reading another one that's for a little bit further down the road. Doing Life with Your Adult Children is what it's called. And so those are books that I'm reading. I tend to like, Sunny, I think you said you like to research. And so now I'm starting to gravitate towards books that I couldn't read, didn't have time for. So I tend to dig in and research and read, and I enjoy that. So there's all kinds of new things that I couldn't do when my kids were younger that I'm, starting to enjoy. And I'm not even all the way there yet, but because I still have homeschooling going on, but it's just easier when your kids get older. So yeah.
Well, and I think that's a great point. You don't have to wait till the kids are gone to do all of those things. Like Lisa, what you said, the kids will leave, your husband won't. So investing in your marriage should be happening all along that time. I also say that my husband's my favorite person in the family for the same reason, because yeah, we try to make our marriage a priority, and that way when our kids are grown, we aren't those couples that I've often sat in a restaurant and looked around and I'm like, oh, there's an older couple just staring at each other while they eat. I don't want that in my relationship. And so that's something that, we've worked at, making sure that we spend time just the two of us without our kids, even when they were very young. Obviously that can be hard sometimes, but that relationship, just the two of us, is very different than the one we have as parents when the kids are around. And so it's important to keep breathing into that. And then I've always maintained my own hobbies or groups of friends or things all along. And I enjoy the time that I spend with them, the conversations I have with them. And so we make it like a regular on our calendar, the third Thursday of the month, we all get together for dinner, and everybody's at differing relationship statuses. Some have kids, some don't. But for me, that's super important to maintain my friendships that aren't just my kids' friends' moms. Like I need people that I would hang out with. And kind of a couple of years ago, I was like, if I could do anything be anything, wild dreams, right? Like when you're a little kid and somebody says, what do you want to be when you grow up? And you're like an astronaut or a ballerina or, those types of things. I was like, is there anything like that I'm leaving on the table? Because I think that ship has sailed, but it hasn't. I just haven't gone back and done those things. So yeah, Christy, you mentioned reading. I also love to read my own books. And the older my kids have gotten, the more time I have for that. I started taking dance classes again. That was something I did when I was little, and it's something I love. But for about 20 years, I thought, oh, now I'm grown, I can't do this anymore. But those things still exist out there. So I would encourage you, I'm not even done yet, but I have a lot of things that I do that I enjoy just by myself or just my husband and I. So that way, when my kids are grown, I will always find ways to fill my time. My daughter teases me. She's like, you'll probably get another job just so you have something to do. She's like, that's the type of person you are. And maybe not. But I think it's important, yeah, to figure out what you enjoy aside from just homeschooling and just the phase of life that you're in right now. Let's talk about those relationships with the adult children, though. Christy, I know you mentioned a book about that too, that relationship changes, of course. And obviously, if you've been homeschooling all along, you know your kids pretty well. You've spent a lot of time with them and you've seen them mature and develop. And so what advice or encouragement would you offer for those who are moving into that adult child phase? How does that relationship change? How did homeschooling help it be better? All of those types of things.
I think it's important to realize that your kids are turning into adults. And I mean, when my girls still lived here, obviously they had to follow some rules. But my daughter now is about to be 21. She has a very serious boyfriend who I believe that she will marry. And so I don't need to micromanage those things. But I want to be invested. They want to hang out with us. My married daughter called and said, hey, we're going on vacation. Will you come with us? I mean, I love that. And I love getting to know my kids on that level. And I love checking in with them and just hearing what they have to say and spending time with them. And I do think our relationship through homeschooling has impacted that. But I just they're cool people. And, I love it that they want to hang out with me. And, we go get our nails done or we, just hang around the store, just window shopping, not even purchasing anything. And then we have those great heart discussions, when something doesn't go right with my daughter and her husband, she seeks out my advice. And I think that is something that you earn along the way. And if you continue to try to micromanage them, I don't believe you're going to earn the right to be heard. Sheila and I were actually talking today. Unsolicited advice is taken as criticism. So I do not get involved in their life if they are not asking. But I love it that they ask, hey, mom, this is happening. What would you do? And that is welcome advice because that means that they're respecting and recognizing that I've lived here longer than they have, and I might have something to do. And it doesn't mean they have to do what I say, but I can offer. So I love having grown-up kids. I love it.
Yeah, a few years before my oldest graduated, a few years ago when my oldest was about to graduate, I was kind of in that dreading part of this. And it's it's kind of like having your wisdom teeth removed, thinking about it, the anticipation is worse than the actual, I think. I mean, maybe yours went badly, but mine were okay. If you had them removed. The anticipation was really hard. And then the actual is actually really a joyful experience. We're home, it's just a new relationship. It's a different, it feels differently. It feels different than it did when they were at home and everything. We were homeschooling full time. It's always a happy, surprise when we aren't expecting to hear from him and he calls us with something that he's dealing with and he wants advice or wants to chat or wants to just tell us what his plan is, or what he's thinking on something and get our feedback. And that feels really amazing. And so I think that all the investments you've made all these years are important. And it's really, really a joyful experience to see the other side of that, I think.
Yeah, I love what you said about anticipation being different than reality, right? Like, so now that I have one in high school, I'm kind of like, oh, she's going to graduate in a few years. We only have a few years left. But instead of dreading that or worrying about that, I'm trying to use that as motivation to really savor these moments that we do have while she's still at home. And then looking forward to the change in the relationship that both of you referenced, where she'll call for advice or call to tell us what's going on in her life as an adult. And I'm sure the same will be true with my son as he gets older. But I think it's really helpful and encouraging to hear from people who have already walked that road before you. So definitely, if you don't know anybody with that's in that situation. I know in my case, I was younger when I got married, younger when I had kids, so a lot of my friends have much younger kids than I do. But getting connected and plugged in with people who have walked that road before you, because when I hear even you two talking right now, it's that reassurance of, okay, it'll be fine, we'll figure it out when we get there, and it's nothing to worry about or panic about now, because obviously you take each new phase as it comes, right? Potty training feels like the end of the world until your child's through it, and then you move on to the next phase. So that's kind of what I hold on to as somebody who hasn't quite gotten there yet. But what would you say to someone who feels like they're going to be homeschooling forever? Maybe they have a big age span between their kids. And so, there might be 12 years between oldest and youngest. I know we see that sometimes, or maybe even more. And it feels like you're just going to be homeschooling forever, or you're starting out and you've got only littles and you've got babies and toddlers and all of that around. I know we said at the beginning, don't do the math to figure out how long it's going to be yet. But beyond that, what other encouragement would you offer if somebody does feel like this is the path they want to pursue, but it feels like a lot right now?
Yeah, I think today you have the grace for today. You don't have tomorrow's grace yet. That will come. God will give you that, but you can't borrow tomorrow's, events or troubles or joys. Today is what you have grace for. So focus there and, know that you will have the wisdom for those years and the energy and the strength and all of those things as it comes day by day. And so take it a day at a time. Yeah.
So I do have an older child. I have a 33-year-old and a 20-year-old. So there are 13 years between my oldest and my youngest. And while I did not homeschool him, I do remember many days thinking, I have been momming for a really long time. And I had a teenager for, I don't even know how many years. And so I remember that feeling of, oh my gosh, this is never going to end, but it does. And like Christy said, worrying about tomorrow does nothing but rob today of its joy. And, it just is what it is. And I just got up and mommed one more day, I remember thinking, if there could just be a day when there's no crying, like that would just be a day. And it came, and then the crying came back because I have girls. And now there's not much crying. There's a few, not much. But it just changes and evolves. And if you savor the moments, it does get sweeter because you're growing really cool people. and hopefully those cool people will want to hang out with you. And then, maybe you didn't have a chance to be with the cool kids when you were younger. Now you got a chance to be with the cool kids. And it's awesome. So I would not do the math. If you're anxious about that, don't worry about it. You just have to homeschool tomorrow. And then the next day, whatever you have. But the Lord is faithful when we do what he asks us to do. He provides every single thing when we need it. He doesn't promise us extra. He just promises enough. And he keeps his promises. So it's okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I lean on that saying about, the days are long, but the years are short. I mean, I've seen that with different phases of whatever my kids were going through, whether that be kind of that teenager toddler stage. Now I've got now a teen, which is actually better, I think, than the preteen was, but you've got all these different phases of childhood that your kids go through. And yeah, so there are the days where you feel like you're pulling your hair out. I love what you said there about just no tears today. Please, Lord, no tears today. And I've definitely had those days where I'm like, God, just give me the strength to get through the next 2 hours. I joke that
To bed.
yeah, when the kids go to bed,
there.
I'm like, okay, I'm off the clock now. That's kind of the way I look at it, where, if somebody gets out of bed and needs something, then it's like, oh, that's more frustrating. But sometimes, that's what's happening, and your kids need you. And I think something you said about them coming back to you for advice, I think they do that because they've learned they can come to you with those things. So, there might be those days you feel like you're sucking it up just to get through it, and without God's help, and maybe the other people in your life, you wouldn't be able to make it through. But definitely when you look back on your memories years later, you don't remember the hard times, not as often anyway. You remember the sweet moments, the times you were cuddled up together, or if you've been homeschooling since the beginning, when your child learned to read or learned how to do those basic things. It's those big light bulb moments. And so they really do make it worth it. The tears and the graham crackers smashed in the carpet and all the things that happened when they were younger. Christy, were you about to add something there?
Yeah, I was going to say that just you already have the experience of parenting, so you know what it feels like to be in the middle of the newborn days where you think you're never going to get a full night's sleep, or the next stage where you feel like you're never going to get through the toddler things, and then every stage has its challenges. But what do we do when it's over? We miss it. So in the middle of when you're feeling like it's going to be forever, look around and enjoy what is there that you're going to miss one day. And there's plenty of that in every stage, including high school and the final years of high school. I have a friend that jokes that when her kids went away to college, she was all dreading it. And then she said, I think God just designed it so that we were like, okay, leave already. Like there's this level of, okay, you get to a point where they're pushing for independence. And you're like, okay, and there is an element of that, but even in every stage, all the way to the very end, I know there are things that I miss for every one of my guys' stages. I'm thankful for things, and I think, wow, if I could just enjoy that for another minute, So I do think that might be hard to hear if you're really frustrated at the moment, but I do think that it's good to look around and be thankful. What can I be thankful for today in the stage that we're in, and be all there wherever we are, whatever stage we're in, experience the joy of that moment that you'll miss one day. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us today and all week. Like we've said, we're here to help you homeschool whenever you need it. So please reach out to us. If you need advice, encouragement, prayer, you can reach out to us in the Sonlight Connections app or on Facebook. We're all there. We would all love to interact with you and help you through things or pray for you. But just be encouraged. So that is our goal, is to encourage you and let you know that it is worth it. And if you need anything, we're here to help. And if things are going really well, share that too, because that's very motivating for those who maybe are struggling to see, oh, it was worth it. It does work out. So share your success successes with us too. We would love to see that. And Christy, Lisa, thank you so much for joining me today and offering encouragement in this session.
Thank you.
Thanks.